Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Sustainability in the Sea. I'm your host, Carissa Cabrera. This is produced and hosted by Futureswell, my ocean conservation media organization and consultancy. I'm so happy to be back with you guys. If you're a new listener, I'm just going to softly ask you, first of all, welcome. I love the ocean too. You love the ocean. We all love the ocean, and we want to listen to podcast content that teaches us how to better care for the ocean, which is what this show is. But please follow this show if you haven't already. You'll get notified on your phone when there's new episodes, but also it's a really good metric for us. I just wish that there was more ocean, climate, environmental sustainability content out in the world, and those metrics help us discuss the need for this to partners. And so it means a lot. Today's episode is just me and you. But before we get into the episode, I just want to say you might notice this episode has not been released on our typical Tuesday late morning Hawaii Standard Time, which is when every episode is released every 2 weeks. This is the only episode where I've diverted from that schedule. And let me tell you why. Taylor Swift was engaged yesterday and she broke the internet, and I wasn't going to have the audacity to release a podcast episode when Taylor Swift was getting engaged and telling the world about her engagement. So this is the only exception to that scheduling rule, but yeah, I'm happy for her. Being a Swiftie is contentious in the environmental field for a number of reasons that we don't need to get into. But for your awareness, I found Taylor Swift when I was 15. She released the song 15 when I was 15. So she was like 17 or 18 or whatever. So I actually have grown up with her over the last 16 years of my life. I have never wavered in my love for her, not even during the eras where people hated her. And I think that's important for you to know about me as we become close friends. And for the newbies, we don't normally talk about Taylor Swift on this show. But today we are actually talking about a conversation that I think is going to be really valuable for early and mid-career ocean conservationists and marine biologists, because it's actually designed by it's actually formatted around a presentation that I gave at the Ocean Uprise Summit by Parlay earlier this month. I'll tell you a little bit more about it, but it's 13 lessons that I learned from working in this movement for the last 10 to 15 years. And I wish that I learned them earlier. And so I thought no better way to prevent other people from making these mistakes or coming to these conclusions over time when I can share them with you. And so I hope they broaden your perspective. I hope they inspire your ocean conservation strategies to be more intersectional, with more depth, and also to bridge the professional and personal pieces of working in this field. I hope you love it. So let's get into it. Welcome back to Sustainability in the Sea. So as I mentioned, this presentation was given at the Ocean Uprise Summit, which was a gathering of, come here, Riley. Hi, Rai. This is my rescue pup. She just turned 10 this year. It was a gathering of actually 30 young people from around the world. Half of them were Hawaii-based, and the other half were from other countries, other areas, other coastal areas, other inland areas that are in the Ocean Uprise network. So Ocean Uprise is a youth activist community that is nurtured by Parlay for the Oceans, an international nonprofit. You may have heard of Parlay for their work that got a lot of attention many years ago. They actually worked with Adidas to integrate recycled fishing line into a line of Adidas tennis shoes. And they are founded by fashion designers. And so they use design and creativity to help bridge solutions within the ocean climate sector. And Ocean Uprise specifically helps young people. You don't have to be on a traditional science path or traditional marine science path to be part of the network, but it helps empower these young people to become leaders in the ocean space. And I would just really encourage you guys to check out their Ocean Uprise internship. They run a few per year. They're virtual, they're open to international applicants, and they're just a really good opportunity for you to get experience and build skills. Check them out. So I gave this presentation to them. I was the youngest speaker on the lineup, and I was really nervous. And I thought, I can teach them about my life and my path, or I can teach them things that they can directly take home with them. And I'm really excited to share those lessons with you. So we're going to get into it. For those of you that don't know, I'm actually the first generation ocean conservationist. So that means I am the first person in my family to pursue an ocean career or an ocean conservation career. Both my parents immigrated to the United States, one of them from Ecuador, I'm Ecuadorian, and the other half from Hungary, I'm half and half. And because they were immigrants, they were really trying to build a strong foundation for the family, my grandparents, for their kids, my parents. And so fields and career paths that were not going to put food on the table were not prioritized in the same way. And I think we find this a lot of like how fields that demand a lot of unpaid work prevent low-income communities from accessing the fields. It's a huge barrier in conservation, especially what you think of as traditional conservation. But yeah, I'm a first generation conservationist, so I had to figure all this out on my own. And so if you're also a first generation conservationist, I hope that I can be like an ocean big sister to you to teach you these lessons. So my first lesson is that ultimately we have to love the ocean first if we're going to ask anyone to care for it, including ourselves, including our friends, including our family. I know that when I speak to any incredible person working in this space, they have their own relationship with the ocean that likely started when they were young. Mine looked unique. I was inland, so the ocean always was special to me. I grew up in the desert, and going snorkeling and going underwater for the first time was a transformational experience for me as a young girl, and I have always loved the ocean. Also, my parents, specifically my dad, really invested in me being a strong swimmer. And so if growing up in Arizona, there's a lot of pools, and I've always felt like a confident swimmer. And so when I would go on the very few vacations that interface with the ocean, I didn't feel scared. I felt like I was equipped, and I'm really grateful for that. But we do have to love it first. You can't ask people to take time out of their day or build a career if you don't love it. And I'm sure you listening to this all have your own ocean connection story where you first fell in love with the ocean and where you first felt inspired to protect this thing that you love. And I think it's important for us to remember that when you are talking to others, because if you're talking to someone who has zero connection to the ocean, maybe just start there. Maybe build a connective bridge to the ocean for them. The second is the ocean can teach you from anywhere. You don't have to be on a coastline to be an ocean conservationist. And I hope that all of you listening know that. There's incredible groups like the Inland Ocean Coalition that help steward the ocean from mountain-based offices. You should check them out. And also, like, I grew up inland, like I mentioned. You don't need to be someone who, surfs every day and free dives every day to care for the ocean. I know some of the most inspiring ocean stewards didn't learn to swim until they were adults, right? And so don't feel like you, just because you grew up away from the ocean, that you can't find yourself there. You can't be part of part of protecting it. Our watersheds are connected, which allows us to work upstream and to care for the ocean in other ways, whether it's what we put down our drains or it's what the rivers bring from the mountaintops down to the sea through our rivers. Conservation, this one I really wish I learned earlier, but the lesson 3 is conservation without considering livelihoods is unjust. So let me just say that again. Conservation without considering the livelihoods of the individuals affected is a justice issue. So I learned this really intimately through my college undergrad work working with the vaquita. So the vaquita is the most endangered marine mammal in the world. It's a porpoise that's found in the Sea of Cortez, the sea inland of the Baja Peninsula on the west coast of North America. And the vaquita, when I was an undergrad, I was 19 when I started working on vaquita conservation, had a population of around 200 individuals. And now in 2025, it has an estimated population of 8 individuals. And so, as someone who started their career working in biodiversity and endangered species, I quite literally watched this species go extinct. And the nuance and the story behind the vaquita is one that I wish more people knew. Because the vaquita is small and elusive and shy and easily stressed, conservation efforts to capture the vaquita and put it in a captive facility for breeding, which has been used for other species, don't really work. They're hard to find. They get so stressed out when you capture them. I would too. But the most important thing you need to know is that the vaquita's habitat overlap with the habitat of a fish species called the totoaba. And the totoaba are a fish that a part of their body, specifically their swim bladder, is very valuable on the black market. The wildlife trade, the illegal wildlife trade, and the black market really is inextricably connected to the endangered species crisis that we face around the world. A lot of these species are going extinct because of interactions or direct demand from the black market. And the totoaba was the specific target species, but the vaquita overlapping with the habitat caused it to be caught as bycatch. So fishermen in Mexico who are trying to put food on the table for their families, who are working under systems that have not set them up to create financial abundance or financial security even, are fishing the totoaba to gain wealth and profits through the black market, and inadvertently contributing to population declines for the vaquita. And when you really look at this from the human lens, they're humans just like us trying to provide for their families, and as a result, they're killing the species that matters. And the solutions to conserving the vaquita started with solutions to support those fishermen finding alternative livelihoods. And I was young. I don't know the historical context. I talked to one of my old mentors, Dr. Jay Nichols, about this. He worked on this when he was in his 20s. But if we had started there, maybe the vaquita would have had a different chance. And we need to evaluate those elements when we think about our conservation. Another good example is the shark fin trade, right? Like the shark fin trade there's a reason that shark fishermen fish sharks. And it's because it creates money for them that they need to survive and that their families need to survive. And creating alternative livelihoods for these individuals instead of demonizing them, instead of treating the issue like black and white, instead of acting like it's oh so simple, is how we should be approaching conservation from a just, intersectional, and livelihood-centered lens. We need to diversify these economies. That's long-term work. And it starts now for these species that maybe aren't there, maybe they're threatened, maybe they're not even endangered yet. So something to consider, a story I always take the opportunity to tell when I have an extra 5 minutes, because the vaquita is a lesson that I learned early on that I just want others to take those lessons with them. Lesson 4, it is possible for protection management and economy to thrive together. I had the honor of studying abroad in the Galapagos Islands, which was extra meaningful for me as an Ecuadorian woman because the Galapagos are under the jurisdiction of Ecuador. And I was 20 and 21 when I went. I was really young. And I watched an entire conservation biodiversity hotspot be managed down to the exact number of visitors known. That Galapagos is a national park. The park knows how many feet were put on each island in the Galapagos. And that visitor management structure inspired me so much because they use those numbers to balance out exposure from the islands. So they'll like shut down an island and visitors won't go to it. And then that habitat will not face the pressure of visitor impact and will then be allowed to recover. And this really informed my work later on here locally, working on Hawaii Green Fee, which we passed this year, because it represented a way to build more equity within visitor economies, within visitor destination areas and regions around the world. And when we balance, Hawaii is a great example of a place that has an imbalance between visitors and residents and environment. But to look at the best case scenario, the Galapagos, and view it as a blueprint, as a gold standard, as something we can look to and adapt, is a really amazing resource for you if you want to work in regenerative tourism through the lens of conservation. I think that so many of these visitor destinations have to integrate conservation in some way. We're seeing it as hotels in the tropics integrate coral planting in their work and things like that. Ocean health is human health, guys. Lesson number 5. You know it. You heard it here first, probably on this show when I interviewed Bodhi a few years ago. His slogan, he should get it tattooed on his body. Ocean health is human health. And as a communications advocate within the ocean conservation world, I believe that it can be difficult when you're having conversations with folks that are outside of the ocean and environmental world who don't already care. It can be hard to get them to care about the sea turtles or the ecosystems. But everyone cares about themselves, their own health, their family's health, their kids' health, and we can draw those connections. I learned this lesson as I dove into the plastic pollution crisis. When I was 22, I discovered the zero waste movement. You guys have to comment if you also were a victim of the zero waste movement. I really thought that my individual waste reduction was all of us needed to go zero waste, and that would solve the plastic pollution crisis. And don't get me wrong, we're a very low plastic household. I really advocate for full cycle stores, circular stores, reuse stores, refill stores, but that is not the answer to the plastic crisis, because we have so much of the plastic production is being engineered by large corporations, petrochemical companies that are polluting not just the world at scale when the plastic is finished being used and gets littered or enters the built environment like land or waters, but when it's actually being created, when it's being refined from crude oil to plastic, because all plastic is made from oil, all plastic is made from fossil fuels, all plastic is connected to the climate crisis. These petrochemical corporations are polluting the communities to which their factories are in, their refineries are in. And areas like Cancer Alley in the Southeast United States are a perfect example of what that looks like when that exposure is evaluated over generations. We're seeing hotspots of chronic illnesses like cancer that are directly linked to the petrochemical industries. It's not fair to assume that, I don't know if fair is the right word. It's not logical to assume that ocean health is separate from human health. It's all the same health. We are part of nature. Planet Earth is healthy. We are healthy. If planet Earth is sick, we are sick. We're seeing that now. Don't forget that in your work, and don't forget to use it as a tool in your back pocket when you're in diverse spaces where you can connect these dots for people that may not know it. This might be a hot take. I believe that all strategies within the ocean climate movement contribute to progress. Is that a hot take? You're going to have to tell me. I think that the disruptors on the front lines facilitating boycotts, the groups like Climate Defiance that are holding leaders accountable through shame and embarrassment, contributes to progress in the same way that those with lobbying experience, working hand in hand with powerful decision makers, whether it be politicians or CEOs, working in those rooms to move the mark, I think both of those approaches contribute to progress. And the more that we spend demonizing those approaches and criticizing those strategies is energy that should be spent elsewhere. And instead of fighting which strategy works, we should be celebrating all of them as one unified movement, one that pushes the mark, one that pushes the mark in a different way. We need to be organizing collectively as a unified group so that we can come for those small, powerful groups of people that are responsible for environmental decline. And we're not doing ourselves any favors when we infight and criticize. How many conversations have I been in where people are like, throwing paint on the Mona Lisa or Van Gogh is not effective? I don't care. I don't care. Like, honestly, my take is that I wouldn't do that, but I see the role for them doing it. And I want us to all get a little closer to that level of putting ourselves in someone else's shoes. You cannot deny that worked in some way. Okay, that's my hot take. All strategies contribute to progress. That'll probably be the promo for this episode. Lesson 7, we're halfway there. Imagery and media can accelerate the cultural shifts needed for faster progress. I had a mentor tell me, or I don't know, it might be a quote actually, change happens slow and then all at once. And I think that media and imagery play a really crucial part of that all at once moment. So a good example for this is the sea turtle and the plastic straw video. There was so much organizing work to stop single-use plastics. Some laws had been passed already. So many organizations were campaigning on this. But that moment, that media moment where the world woke up to the ways that plastic straws harm the ocean and the sea turtles that live in the ocean, created a cultural shift that laid the platform for faster political shifts or policy-based shifts. And cultural shifts, I work a lot in the realm of cultural shifts because media is part of that, right? You can't quantify it in the same way you could say we passed a law, but you can't pass the law without the cultural shifts, without the awakening, without the mass awareness. Another good example of this is the social justice organizing around the Black Lives Matter movement when it was adopted, I would say largely by the masses during the pandemic. That social justice work had been being done. It's been going on for decades, okay? For like literally so long. But this ecosystem of environmental factors, of the pandemic, of another shooting, of all of us being home and watching it on our screens, that created the cultural shift needed to accelerate a ton of justice-based progress. Those cultural shifts are needed. And you photographers, you videographers, you storytellers out there, you're a big architect of the media that can drive those cultural shifts that we need. So don't take that lightly, because there's a lot of power behind cameras. Lesson 8. Big changes are just a result of many small changes. In the same way that change happens slowly and then all at once, that slow phase is the small steps. I learned this through my experience passing or playing a small role in passing Hawaii Green Fee. Someone told me like, oh, it takes like 6 years to pass a bill in Hawaii. I don't know how it is elsewhere. Yeah, there's like a trajectory. You have to like build a momentum. You have to do all these things. But in my head, I was like, what do you mean we can't just like pass something big? And it's like, you make small changes first. You don't wake up tomorrow and ban all of those petrochemical companies. You start by making small attacks over time. And those add up to the big changes anyway. So you might not think that you've accomplished something big yet, but maybe it's because you're on the precipice of it, or maybe because if you look behind you, all of these small things are just a part of the bigger thing. And you won't be able to see it until you're on the other side. And I'm God, I'm grateful to be on the other side of that project right now. Bottom-up approaches must be met with top-down approaches. So let me explain a little bit about what I mean. So a top-down approach would be like the International United Nations is making a treaty on plastics. They are making that plastics treaty, or they're making that high seas treaty. That's a top-down approach. Another example of a top-down approach might be at the state level, our governor is trying to pass a law. None of that matters if it's not complemented by a bottom-up approach. A bottom-up approach is the grassroots, the advocates that show up to testify, the protesters that wave their picket signs and say, we want this, the single-use plastic bans happening at the city and county local level that show the international decision makers. Actually, this is all very much in demand. I had someone in a federal legislative office tell me once, it was my first time ever going to Washington, D.C. And I said, are we going to get like what if we want an outright single-use plastic ban federally? What are we going to do about that? How are we going to do that? And they go, well, we really need like a lot of states, a lot of cities, and then a lot of states passing those so that we can make the case up here that the majority of Americans want it. And the only really demonstrated track record to show that the majority of Americans want it is if it's already passed in so many other places. And I go, duh, okay, that makes sense. But you might be on the bottom game and feeling like I do this sometimes. I romanticize the top-down approach. I'm like, should I be at these UN convenings? But I'm not. I'm a grassroots girl. I'm a bottom-up approach girl. And you got to find allies in those top-down approaches at all levels, really. As we think about like building large-scale change and coalitions, which for those of you that maybe this is your first sustainability episode, that's what I'm all about, is how do we scale this up to the biggest impact it can possibly make. Okay, we're almost done. Lesson 10, solutions move at the speed of relationships. They move at the speed of relationships. Okay, sorry about that. I saw something when I was maybe 25, just a young girl, mid-career, thinking I was doing some stuff. And it was like talking about in the context of marine protected areas. And it was saying like governments that establish marine protected areas seem to think they're managing the ocean, when in reality, they're managing people who are managing the ocean. And I was like, duh. Okay, so everything is interpersonal relationships. Your relationships with your friends that may become professional allies, your relationship with your classmates, maybe you're in school right now, your relationships with your advisors, your professors, your nonprofit co-volunteers that with the community group that you're part of. Those relationships are what allow you to make change. We do nothing alone. Nothing is done individually. Nothing is accomplished within conservation alone. And I would be very skeptical of any stories that center that narrative because it is simply not possible to do things alone. And your solutions that you want to build, you will need to ask for help. You have to ask for help. And the people who are going to help you are the ones that you have the relationships with. And it's not transactional, it's reciprocal. So people always ask me, how did Futureswell like become what it is? I have this theory. Well, mind you, you guys know I come from a background in nonprofit, so the fact that I run a business is hilarious because I run this business like a nonprofit, even though it's technically for profit. But I do this thing where I always give something away to someone I want to partner with first. I will never ask anyone for anything until I have already shown them that, first of all, I believe in it, right? So, and then you give something away, as in maybe it's your time, maybe it's a project, maybe it's working for free on something. And I think that maybe that comes because I grew up doing volunteer work, doing unpaid work as a student, but I also just like do work days and understand volunteering is part of my movement, and I don't need to be paid to like go help the planet. Like, I want to make a livelihood for it. But the point is that if I want to partner with someone, I'm going to help them. I'm going to ask them how they need help. And I'm going to say, I can help you in this way. And I think people can just see my intentions in that way. And I would just challenge, maybe you don't know your approach yet, but maybe challenge how you're approaching it. I had to unlearn a lot of capitalism-based beliefs around transaction that I didn't want to bring into my business. And it's more about reciprocity. And I ask for help, but I never expect help. And what I found is that people are willing to help because I'm willing to help them, and because we care for each other. Anyway, your relationships are your pathway to make waves in this movement. Take time for them and treat people like humans, because especially in the conservation world, we are just simply it's been a rough year. We are all just trying to do good work and leave this place better than we found it. And it's a very different working environment than like the business world, right? And so I can only talk from that perspective of conservation, but your relationships really matter. And when somebody wants to take you out for a beer and talk story about your work, maybe say yes next time. I almost didn't include this. I told the Ocean Uprisers, I was like, hey guys, like I almost didn't include this one because it's a little bit personal, but I think that it's important because it is a lesson I have personally learned that helped me make more of an impact in conservation. And the lesson is, the deeper that you understand yourself, the deeper you can make an impact. Your relationship with yourself is the most important relationship that you have in your entire life. You need to spend time to know what you want to do. I always say, like, you're here to find your role. You're here to find your role in ocean conservation. I have this show so that you can learn about the ways that people are helping, and you might get ideas from their roles. But they had to all find their place. And you find your place by understanding your values, understanding what you want out of life, understanding what brings you joy, and understanding what natural skills and gifts you have. You have to nurture that relationship and self-understanding if you want to build the life that you love within the conservation movement. And the more I spend during those early years, those hustle years with Futureswell, the more I spent away from doing legitimate work that was going to build Futureswell into what I wanted to build it into, I felt guilty. And now I know that the time I spent with the ocean, the time I spent alone, the time I spent talking about ideas, talking out ideas with Alex, with the people that are closest to me, that helps me understand what I want to do with Futureswell. Because people ask me, and I know this world is going to look a lot different in 10 years, 20 years, that I'm still going to be working, still going to be running Futureswell. So I can't tell you what I'm going to be doing for Futureswell in 10 years, but I can tell you what I will do in 18 months from now. So take time to understand yourself, because the more that you nurture that understanding, you're not going to be swayed by others. Someone might come in. I used to be 22 and a woman would walk in the room, like just a woman in the ocean space. And I'm like, God, I want to do what she's doing. I didn't want to do what she was doing. I wanted to be a woman in the ocean leadership space. And that looks different for everyone, right? Lesson 12, your individuality is what the movement needs. So all the things that make you unique, all the things that make you specific, like your friends are like, I love you for this reason. Your family's like, God, you've always had a knack for that. That individuality is something no one else can bring to this movement. And that part of you that makes you different from everyone else is likely going to be the part of you that shapes what you do within the ocean conservation world. Don't erase it, and definitely whatever you do, I know some of us may be young and I struggle with this too. Whatever you do, don't try to resist conforming to what the world believes you need to do, or what the world thinks, the boxes, the buckets that you have to work in ocean science. We need an army of ocean conservation media consultants, freelancers. That's what I need right now. I have organizations reaching out every day. Do you have someone who can run our social media? We're doing whale shark research. No, I don't. Is that you, by the way? Reach out to me. Okay. Your individuality is what the movement needs. And my last lesson is that we actually get, me and you and everyone else in this collective movement, we get to imagine and build the future together. How exciting is that? But we have to imagine it before we can build it. And imagination requires creativity. It requires listening to others. It requires learning from different areas, from different communities, from having an open mind. And it requires, like I said, creativity. We're creating it. We are creating the world of tomorrow. We're creating the systems to replace the systems that haven't worked. We're creating the programs that are going to get us closer to those new systems. And we are building it brick by fucking brick. We're building it to replace what we've known, what have gotten us into this mess in the first place. And that comes with a lot of responsibility. But the key to this lesson is that we get to do it together. And none of us have all the answers. Actually, none of us have the answers because we have to create it and imagine it. But we do have something to contribute. And some of that is the most exciting parts of my career, is when I get to build something new. I'm looking at, on the other side of this camera is my wall in my office, and I'm looking at 3 or 4 pieces of art that I have hung, and one of them says, "Joy sustains activism, so go out and celebrate your joy." The other one says, "They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds, so don't rush what you're building. It takes time to grow and nurture it." And I think that the more we lean into the fact that we get to imagine these blueprints or imagine these solutions, we then can draw inspiration from the other blueprints around the world and then adapt it for our home communities. And so if you've got a big imagination, if you are a dreamer, if you're someone who sits around and thinks through this stuff for fun, it's probably the most in-demand skill I think we need. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but these episodes, these one-on-one episodes, are getting a little bit more deep and philosophical. And I think it's because I'm getting older, and we've been now running the show for 3-4 years, and I'm changing and I'm growing as a conservationist alongside you guys. And that's a really beautiful thing to know that we have this community and we have the Futureswellies all around the world that are dedicated to this movement. And I feel like I'd be astounded to know that these lessons helped anyone. And because I wish that I know they helped me, and I wish that I knew them earlier. And so thanks for listening. Thanks for the work you're doing. And if you have lessons, comment them below so we can learn from each other. I love you guys. All right. This has been an episode of Sustainability in the Sea.